Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Clint Rudy, Director of the Suffolk Public Library. On behalf of the Library Advisory Board and library staff, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. We are very excited about this process. I hope that you will take the time to share as much as possible to make this new library a community space and destination. To help guide this process and design of our new library, we have hired the architectural firm of Quinn Evans. I want to now introduce Chuck Gray with Quinn Evans. Chuck?
Thanks, Clint. We're glad to be here. It's a great evening to talk to everyone in Suffolk about this new project. It's going to be, we think, a very remarkable and impactful project for not only the downtown community, but the entire city. And on behalf of the entire team that I represent, we are just thrilled to have this opportunity with you this evening. Our agenda tonight is fairly straightforward. We're going to introduce ourselves in a little bit, talk about the project schedule as an overview, give you some feedback and thoughts about modern libraries as we see them being critical elements of the community, discuss our approach to community engagement and the survey that we've started, and then have a chance at the end to have thoughts and comments and insights from the group tonight. About our team, as Clint indicated, I am Chuck Ray with Quinn Evans. I'm the team's principal in charge. With me tonight is Shannon Ray, our lead interior designer, and Jeff Hoover, our friend and colleague who we've collaborated with now for over a dozen years on nearly 20 projects. Jeff brings a tremendous expertise and background in library planning and design, and we are thrilled to have him again with us. The project schedule, it lays out pretty much typically as it would typically for any kind of project. We have a community engagement and programming phase, which started in May and will end in the middle of August of this year. From that, we will move into design, starting in the middle of September and roughly running about a year until August of 2021. It will take about 3 months for the project to be competitively bid and awarded to a general contractor, with construction starting in late December of 2021, running all the way through February of 2023. At that point in time, the library system will be moving in the shelving and the collection, furniture, the library technologies and instructional technologies with the goal of opening up in the spring of 2023. We are having a series of community meetings and community engagement points. Tonight is our first online session. There's another scheduled for the end of July on the 28th. That's at the same time at 7 o'clock. So Jeff, were you going to pick this up, I think?
Sure. Just to get started, it'd be useful to get a sense of who all is here. And so I'm going to launch a poll and ask you all to respond whether or not you have been, or a member of your household has been, to the library in the past year. It has been very tough to get to the library in the last several months. So we are asking about, maybe over the course of the last year. If you're having any trouble with the polling, that's okay. There's another way you could respond to these questions. You can answer the same questions on a web survey it'll sort of mirror all of the questions we're asking tonight. And that's useful in two ways, because technology sometimes lets us down. And also because even if somebody weren't able to dial in at this time, they could still participate in responding to the polling and questions from tonight. So I think we have almost everybody responding. And if I just share the results, it looks like absolutely everybody who is here tonight is a library user. That's good. It indicates, that perhaps a large percentage of the community are active library users. On the other hand, we are also interested in hearing from people who are not currently library users, but for whom we could fine tune the facility in the future to entice them to come. So with that, I think I'll just close these polling results and hand it back to Chuck.
So I know that many of you that if everyone who's on the call tonight has been to the library in the last so many months, I think you have reasons to believe why the library is an important place in our society and in our communities. But there are many who ask questions about that still, even today, about the relevance of a public library, because there are lots of things happening in the world that might think that libraries are no longer or less relevant than they were be. You may know that Google is trying to scan every book in the world and create a digital library. Why would we need a public library? You can find access to public computers to access information in Burger King locations, in subways. Some people believe the technology, maybe not so clunky, you'll have access to digital content through your eyewear and your readers. And if you're in a New York City subway, you can get free access to ebooks while you're on the train. So why go to the library? And what we're finding is that the libraries are more and more relevant than they've ever been. Tons of research, lots of data, much of it anecdotal, a lot of it hard science and research. Libraries are compelling spaces in our communities. More libraries than McDonald's, which is maybe a good thing. Millennials are some of the most active users of libraries of all generations. And that's a positive sign, we think, and a good sign for the future. The old model of the library had the collection, the books chained to the shelves, chained to the desks. And the library itself was a very collection-centric environment. The individuals and people came to the library to view those and read those books, and that was a model that existed for a long, long time. And that model has been changing now for over a decade, where the library is now a place for community gathering and learning, and it is a community-centric, a patron-centric space where the collection is important, but is not the primary functional spatial goal of the building. And the ingredients of the library have really changed in terms of their relationship to one another, where collections were the primary reason for the library's existence. Today, it's really about the spaces for the people, with quality collections and abundant technology, all of which supports services and resources and programs that your library leadership develop specifically for your community. So where do we as architects and designers start? And we start by meeting with the community, asking questions, trying to understand the issues and options and opportunities that are so specific to your community, trying to understand the unique characteristics of the demographic usage, of the kinds of programs and services offered, and we do a lot of active listening, and that is primarily the reason for this meeting tonight.
Right. So is another sort of way for us to understand the community and understand how the community uses the library. We're going to ask you to respond to another poll here. This one asks, which of these spaces do you go to when you visit the library? And you can, hopefully if this works right, you can pick as many of these that are appropriate to your visit. And so if you would all just, sort of look over the plan of the library, and if you want to see the plan and the polling thing is in the way, on your computer, you can just sort of drag the window off to the side. On the other hand, if you're struggling with that on your PC, so on your phone, you could skip the poll and go back to see the plan. And then there's this poll in progress button that you could click on to get back to the poll. On your PC, on the other hand, as long as a poll is open, even if you've closed the window, you can get back to it by clicking on the little poll icon here down at the bottom. But it seems as though people are getting the hang of it. We got like more than 80% have responded, 88%. So we're doing okay. And I think everybody probably who wants to has responded. And just, sort of for your information, the way it looks like, we see kind of a broad cross-section of spaces being used. No one is absolutely dominant, but it looks like, a lot of you enjoy the new books area of the library, the print collections, the meeting room. Well, meeting room is probably the second most important thing, or second most visited space. Teens and young adults, not a lot are clicking that. I take that to mean that they're probably they're out doing something more fun, unfortunately, than than listening to our presentation about the library. That's phase one of this question. The next one, also relevant to this, is not only sort of where you go, but where would you typically select to spend the most time. And so in this question, you only get to pick one. If you pick it, and then you can unpick it and change your mind. But once you hit submit your poll, you'll sort of be locked in. And we'd like to get a sense of not only where people go in the library, because a lot of people are diverse users of the facility, but also where do people really spend their time? If you wanted to pick a spot that is sort of your best spot, or where you tend to spend the most time, where would that be? And as soon as we get like up to about 80% responses, I'll post them again. Okay, I think let's see what we learned. The children's area is where most people like it the best, as it turns out. And certainly we know that designing the space for the youngest users of the library is going to be a really important part of the development of the facility going forward. It looks like a large percentage of the people will be pleased with that. And seeing 27%, actually we'll see later on that, as I recall, about 25%, 26% of the people who are responding to our online survey are people with kids who are preschoolers. And that maybe dovetails with that 27% marking there. And then the meeting room, new books again, are popular spots. Okay, well, we've learned a little bit already this evening. And so what I'd like to do is just, I'll talk about the rest of what we've learned. We actually have almost 300 survey responses right now. I just peeked in on it a few minutes before we started this meeting. And among those 275 responses, there are, 1,000, I'm sure now, narrative comments. So it's a kind of open-ended survey form. We think we make it easy to fill out with lots of check boxes, so that if you're really busy, you can at least get that much information in. On the other hand, if you have something to say, there are opportunities to contribute there. And I hope everybody who's here tonight has had a chance to do the survey. Later on, we'll share the link for that. And of course, that is on the library's website as well. So far, just looking at the demographics, as I alluded to earlier, we're getting a good cross-section of ages responding. A third of them are in the sort of the younger demographic, 30 to 56. And another third overlaps with that in the 46 to 65. We don't have a lot of response yet from the youngest part of the demographic, and pretty good response from seniors, though, at this point in time, with a number from the over 65. Again, I mentioned this already, 25% have at least one preschooler at home, and then looking over from that at the school kids at home, about 45% have school-age kids in the household. Another thing we're seeing is family size. The people who are responding to the survey so far are sort of above the average in terms of national standards, or national statistics rather, for the number of kids per family. Quite a large number of larger families in the area that'll be served by this population, this library, the service population for this library. So that tells us a lot also about how we might structure the emphasis of the design in the facility. And then the last one here is seniors at home. A fair number of households have seniors at home. And as we parse the data more carefully, we'll be able to see how many sort of multiple generation families there are out there with 3 and 4 generations. And that, again, that'll help inform us relative to the kind of library that we want to shape up for the future of Suffolk Library users. The library, relative to other information we've garnered from the survey, the library ranks first, after a coffee shop or cafe, as the preferred destination that anyone would go to in the community for studying, reading, and collaborating. So that's encouraging. That dovetails with what Chuck was saying earlier, that libraries, still are quite a popular destination all across America. And 51% of the people in responding to the survey go to the library at least once a month, go to the Morgan Library at least once a month. However, the majority of them spend less than an hour when they're there. Despite the fact that the library offers great programs and activities, after about an hour, people are ready to leave the library. I think that probably tells us something about the existing facility as well, which we'll get into a little bit more in a minute. And most say that the Morgan Library is the most convenient library to their daily lives and activities. But again, most of them also go to other libraries instead of going to Morgan. Again, this is giving us some clues about how popular this particular facility is within the community. That's something we're definitely going to be working very diligently to improve on. And we also hear that most people like the North Suffolk Library. So maybe we can look to these other facilities for clues about, what is the preference. We ask, 3 other little questions in the survey, and the basic questions are what works and what doesn't, and what's missing. And just to give you a sampling of feedback that we've gotten from this first question about what works, people like, that it's a kind of a downtown, hometown library feel to it, and the staff are great, and they feel it's an inclusive facility. It has a meeting room to host events. There are activities that get hosted there. There's opportunities for children to play and interact with each other as well as with the collections, and there's educational toys and other activities hosted by the library for kids. So this is what we get an impression of from this, is that people like the kind of stuff the library offers to do, and there isn't a lot of talk in the what works category that says much about the building itself. However, when we look at the what doesn't work, this is where there's a lot more commentary about the building. The library feeling kind of like a functional thing in the community, but not so inviting. That the spaces are tight for computers, for events, and we got teens on top of adults. There should be separate areas for different demographics who have different, auditory attributes, I guess. The teens and the kids are too noisy for a lot of the other users. And frankly, it just needs more space. It needs to be more accessible. And it's hard to get a seat in the library. As I said, it's a noisy place. It's active, and that makes noise. And in what is essentially a one-room library, in a way, in terms of the public spaces, it's difficult to manage, noisy and quiet activities in the same volume. So it's much too, crowded and drab and ready for some improvement. And that's what this next point was about, the most missing question. What can we do, in the next library to make it be the kind of library where people will tend to come more often and spend more time. And just having a great place to be able to sit and read a book next to a window would be apparently a delight, as some of these comments indicate. And while the respondents are happy with the services the library provides for children, the space could be even more child-friendly. And then, working through other demographics of age, if there were opportunities to, carry on a decent job search, if there was capacity in the library to provide support for small businesses, if there were places to really support, family-based initiatives, and better technology and better access to technology equipment as well as software. And having a meeting room is great, but having a handful of meeting rooms of different sizes that would accommodate different needs is something we're hearing about a lot as well, from even down to the size of a 2-person space for tutoring and mentoring. And then some productive places and play places and a cafe-like space and book sale space. And fundamentally a comfortable, enjoyable ambiance overall. So those are some of the things. Again, this is a smattering of 1,000 different comments that we have so far that we will compile, conclusively and inclusively into a report about everything we hear from the community about, what's wanted in the library. We're also asking some questions about what people want to do, and then graphing them and analyzing what it is. And in this particular representation, the more green there is, the more popular a thing is, and the more red there is or orange, then it's less popular. But there's a big spectrum of things that people will like to do. Of course, we can't help but see browse the collections is still a very popular activity, gets the highest level of green markings here. But there's other things, from studying and writing by myself, and spend times with others in a cafe-like space, and attend a class, an event for adults. There's a spectrum of different possible and popular opportunities that we could accommodate in the library, if we shape it up just right in the future. So again, we'll be collecting more data and parsing this data even more carefully in a report that we'll produce at the end of the community engagement session. We've also talked to the staff, of course, quite a lot, to get their perspective on what a great library will be for the community. These are the folks who interface with all the different patrons the library has on a daily basis. And it was interesting to see the spectrum of different kinds of comments that they had, which were not specifically about their individual areas of responsibility in the library, but really very broad. Notions about developing new services, enhancing existing ones, making large spaces where people can study or really sort of be inward focused without being distracted, and of course having a building that attracts not only the people who are already coming, but the full spectrum of the community into the library, and making it the sort of creating the community sort of ownership of the library as a facility. So it really feels like it belongs to the people who are, inspired to use the facility. The notion of inspiring civic engagement amongst teens popped out. There are a lot of comments about working with the teen population and getting them interested in spending time in the library and making productive use of their time when they're there. And, having the appropriate technology, again, was important. But also the last point was that they really wanted to make the library be a kind of a come in and set a spell, come in and spend some time and stay a while kind of facility. And they're thinking that resonates well with the community. So that's some of the words that we have heard so far. And now I'm going to do another poll, and that is this sort of like, pick 3 words that from among these that you think, would best describe the future library for you. So if you would all, go back to the polling and ponder these, and again, pick 3 words that you find meaningful. I will just say that if you do go to the online version of this, or the SurveyMonkey version, there's actually one more option to pick, and that is some other word that you think would be useful, and then you can write in whatever that other word might be. I couldn't make that functionality work with the Zoom meeting interface. Only about half have participated so far, so choose a few words. First, just like first impression. Okay, we've got 88%. Any last minute selections? Okay, I'm ending it. What did we learn? It's a place of, I think that pops up at the top, a place of information, which would be more or less the standard response. Oftentimes libraries as a repository of information, but this notion that the library is not only a place where information is stored, but it's actually where learning happens is an important aspect of how we're going to plan the future library, not only for learning from books, but also learning from experiences, learning from actually doing things, learning from listening to others talk about their areas of expertise. And information is high. Events, well, that'll dovetail with the learning, sort of the experiential learning we've been talking about. And child development, being a welcoming place. Increasingly, although we didn't see very many selections of this interaction one at the bottom, increasingly what we're seeing among 21st century libraries is that it is tending to become more and more a place of interaction between individuals as they, maybe share information together, as well as a place of, sort of a person with a book garnering information. So we'll probably see more of that. All right, I'm going to stop sharing those poll results. And as we have, sort of heard some words describe the kinds of spaces and activities that we might see in the library, here are a series of images that from other contemporary libraries that may resonate with you in some ways. Shannon, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So we just want to spend the next part of the presentation showing you some work that Jeff and Chuck and I have done over the past decade as a way to illustrate the possibilities of what you might see in your new downtown library. Starting with a welcoming entrance, having a space that is grand and speaks to the civic character of the library and its importance within the community, a space that has a retail-like character where the most popular materials are easily accessible and on display, a space that has a generous amount of breathing room. So when a patron enters, they have the opportunity to get acclimated, and hopefully through design clues and signage, they're able to easily understand where to go intuitively within the library. And something you'll notice or maybe not notice is the sort of traditional imposing circulation desk is taking a much more backseat role, but always maintaining, great sight lines for staff to the front door.
Shannon, before
and as you all noted in the survey, having access to a variety of meeting spaces, from the large traditional more formal type meeting space to meeting spaces that support groups of 10 to 15, making sure that we have spaces that are appropriately sized so that we're not burdening the large meeting room with groups of 10 or 15 people. We're also finding that the formality of the large meeting room is changing a bit, that it's not just for presentations, but we're finding that these spaces support things like dance classes and yoga instruction. So it'll be important to pay attention to the finishes and the way that those spaces are outfitted. And that extends to children's program spaces as well, having dedicated places for story time and crafting activities, places that are fun and dynamic. We often have the wall delineating the space to the children's story time room be an articulating wall, so that if you've got a really large event or really popular story time, you have the ability to open up that room and have the group sort of spill out into the children's area. Places for small group collaboration are extremely important. We are finding that incorporating these into adult areas, teen areas, as well as children's areas, and no matter how many you incorporate, it always seems like there's never enough. And making sure that there's tremendous variety in these, some that are enclosed spaces, some that are open, some that have technology, some that don't. Doing a different type of furniture so that if you prefer a lounge posture for a meeting, you have that option, or a standing height posture. And in addition to the formal meeting spaces, recognizing the importance of informal gathering places, places that are outfitted with comfortable furniture that allow patrons to just come in and sit down and hang out. Oftentimes, these are places that are found interstitial spaces within the library. Next. This learning stair at the Verina Library is one of our most favorite sort of informal gathering places. And at the end of the window wall is a recessed motorized projection screen that drops down and allows this library to feature movie nights. And depending on the character furnishings and the lighting, creating places with a cafe-like ambiance, it really allows people to come together in very intentional ways and hopefully serendipitous ones. And extending program spaces to the outdoors. In the context of COVID-19, this is more important than ever. And libraries who have outdoor program space are so grateful for that, because they're able to do in-person programs while still, maintaining the health and safety of their patrons and their staff. And creating opportunities, like this reading porch at the Verina Library, to be able to go out and just be a part of nature and sit down and read a book.
I'm going to jump in here and talk about this slide, because I think what's so incredibly important and significant is the commitment the city of Suffolk has made to build a new downtown library. Not only will this be a hub for your community, it will also, we believe, be an economic engine and help generate redevelopment and spur help continue to push and encourage private investment in the downtown community. We've seen that time and again, and it's just a very, very smart move on the city's part.
So we realize that there are still books in the library, but the approach to the collection has really evolved into one of being a retail-like experience with sloped shelving, with face-out display and integrated lighting that really showcases the collection, because the goal is that the books aren't on the shelf. We really want them to be out circulating in the community. And this approach, go back. I just wanted to point out that the approach to children's as well, by having face-out browsing bins for picture books, is a great way for children to be able to interact with the collection as well. And speaking of children's spaces, creating dynamic environments that are childlike without being childish. We want to make sure they're not overly thematic, that they invite a children's imagination. They encourage people to connect with one another, parents to network with one another. Spaces that support learning through play. The image on the left is our version of every child's favorite toy, the cardboard box. And children can imagine this as a puppet theater or a house or a boat. So we want to make sure that the children's space doesn't overly prescribe or isn't overly prescriptive, and making sure that there are options for early learning. We're finding that many communities are placing a much greater emphasis on early learning, and the image on the bottom right is an early literacy center that we're going to incorporate into the new Northeast Library in Northeast Maryland, because that community found that they didn't have a lot of options for preschool programs, and the library felt like they needed to fill that void by devoting a significant portion of their children's area to early learning. And making sure there's great space for teens. We understand, in talking with the staff and what we've learned from the survey, that there is a really strong teen contingency in downtown Suffolk. So we want to create a space for them that is unique and special, that's outfitted with the right type of furniture and character of finishes that really makes this a destination place for them, a place where they feel comfortable coming in, hanging out, and staying for a while. And making sure that we have adult spaces. These are all examples of adult reading spaces, and what you'll notice is the variety of types of furniture. Furniture that supports more focused activities, furniture that supports group activities, because our goal is that everybody has their Goldilocks moment in finding their just right place in the library. And recognizing that there needs to be a balance. There are still patrons who seek out the library for that quiet, focused study. And as libraries have become and evolved to be much more vibrant and active and noisy spaces, recognizing that we still need to incorporate places that are quiet. And a new program space that is actually featured in 2 of our most recent libraries is the notion of a family gathering space. You know, libraries have historically provided dedicated space for adults and for children and teens, but this is a space that really supports an entire family, a place where a teen would feel comfortable coming and hanging out with a grandparent. And this was something that was a direct result of feedback that we heard from the community, where families were coming to the library with, you know, multiple ages of kids, and they really didn't feel like they had a place within the library that supported the entire family. So that is an important component to create family-centric spaces.
Okay, well, that's a great overview of a broad spectrum of different kinds of library spaces. And I think, you know, that most of those images came from facilities that are, you know, roughly the same size as what Suffolk is anticipating in their library. So it's not too far off the mark. It's not too much of a big dream, although we want to dream big, to think that these kinds of spaces could wind up being part of the new Suffolk Library. What I'd like to do is sort of get some reaction to all the participants regarding the set of images, some of which we've seen and some of which will be new. And I'm going to show, you know, well, 5 different collections of images. And I would like it if you could, in response to the poll, identify, for instance, you know, which of these particular spaces would you say is the most welcoming to you personally? And you know, if you're working on a phone, you can pinch and zoom to make, you know, these images bigger and sort of look around them a little bit better. And if you're on a computer, if you double click, it'll, you know, enlarge to occupy your whole screen, and double clicking again, it'll shrink back down. So those are some of the spaces which we you know, think of different kinds of welcoming characteristics. So if you would, you know, take a minute here and look through them and you know, pretty sort of viscerally, initially, gut reaction, decide, you know, number whatever is the one that strikes me as most welcoming. Because when I launch the poll here, you need to remember your number because it'll probably cover up some of the images. So go ahead and just pick, you know, the one that you feel resonates as being most welcoming to you. And of course, if they all seem like off-putting and not very welcoming at all, then there's an option at the bottom also say, yep, none of these are for me. You know, bring up another set of images. All right. Well, it looks like, you know, number 3 was a very popular image, and it's 1, 2, and 4 are kind of tied with that. Okay, now we have another one, another board to look at of images. At least one of them is still the same, but we can think about it from a new perspective. In terms of, you know, sort of the family-friendly spaces, the spaces where you'd want to bring your kids or, you know, the neighbor's kids and spend some time in the library. Again, same thing here. Pick a spot that you think is the one that would resonate with you, and then I'll launch that polling. And when we get about, you know, 3/4 of you all responding, we'll take a peek and see what everybody says. Again, this would be really, you know, even more powerful if you encourage your friends and neighbors to also participate in these exercises, which again, I said, will be available online afterwards as well. All right, almost everybody has had an immediate reaction to these. And I will tell you that it looks like number 2 and number 6 were tied. And if I share these results, you can see that. And number 3 was also, a very popular spot. Okay, the next one, and there's only 2 more after this. The next one here is comfortable. If you study these pictures and think about which one looks like the place you would like to get comfortable and spend some time in the library, pick one. And again, there were 1 or 2 repeated images from other questions, but they can, any space can be seen in multiple ways. Some of these you've seen before. So again, the polling is launched, and if everybody could fire when ready. Okay, I'm going to share these results. People are getting good at polling. And again, number 6 was identified as one of the most comfortable comfortable spaces among the spectrum, I think, of comfortable spaces. But it looks like number 1 and number 6 resonated with most folks. And another one, and there's one after this. And in this case, we're looking at spaces where you wouldn't necessarily be as comfortable, but a space where you might choose to go if you felt like you really had to get something done. Which one of the spaces would you pick to be productive? But it is in a parallel vein. It's sort of a place to be productive with others, a place to be collaborative, and same exercise. Which of these spaces would you say was the one that felt most collaborative? And it looks like number 5 got a lot of high marks. Those kids there are being pretty collaborative. Here's the results. Number 5 and number 2 seem like the kind of spaces that resonate with everybody here this evening as being, the collaborative zone in the library. So with that, I'm going to just turn it back to Chuck, and as we're coming close to the end of our slides here, and talk about how library services have changed over time.
Well, I think what we want to reinforce as we begin to end the conversation tonight is that we know that Suffolk is a unique community, as are all communities, and part of our effort is to sincerely understand how your thoughts and feedback influence and shape the design. We also know that library services, the things that Clint and his team are so focused on tuning and providing to support your community and your needs and your aspirations, those are changing. And we're seeing, an increased and broadening spectrum of the kinds of activities and services that the libraries are offering, whether it's focusing more intensely on teaching life skills, or to enhancing community outreach, which we know that Suffolk Library is already doing in some really wonderful ways. We're seeing libraries as more important places for business and entrepreneurial startups to find home and seek advice and information. As Shannon mentioned, early learning is becoming very much a service and a role of the public library in many communities. And we're seeing some interesting things that are technology driven, whether it's access to unconventional collections that are digitally curated and available for all, whether in the library or not, or whether it's the real techie stuff, which is virtual reality or augmented reality, which gets into some real sophisticated services and kind of technologies that the library might have. And I think all of this is happening and will continue to happen. And the things that we talk about tonight that will change tomorrow, and things that we don't know about tonight that will be different in a year from now. And our goal is to really ensure the design of the building is adaptable, and there's tremendous equity in the building, and it will have an impact for generations to come for the citizens of the community and the downtown itself. We're excited by all of that.
Yeah, it will be a new kind of facility that offers interesting opportunities for gathering knowledge, sharing information, individual learning, and just a host of experiences that will be pretty positive. The last question we have for the evening is, are there experiences or things to do that you would like to be able to do in your library that the current facility doesn't support? And the way you can answer this question, since it's an open-ended kind of a question, you'd have to write it up. You can use the chat section, which should be, again, down at the bottom of your screen, roughly where it's indicated here. And just type in what, if you have, something you've been looking for in the library that maybe makes you go to a different library to get it, or something else you go elsewhere in the community altogether, but you think would be appropriate to include in the library. We want to, be open-minded about our approach to, really identifying all the various parts and pieces of the future library, now early on in our overall design process. I mean, we haven't put pencil to paper to make a sketch yet on this facility. Before we start in on that, it's going to be useful to hear what it is the community is looking for. And I see a lot of comments popping up in chat as we go here, so that's good. Keep that up, and you can keep chatting and adding content here as I just transition, I think, into our last slide. Certainly, if you have more questions as well as comments, you can offer them up in the question and answer section. And from today, there's an online survey with all of these questions that were asked tonight. And of course, there is the comprehensive online survey that really asks the most in-depth questions, and we would really like it if you could respond to that one as well. And once you do, encourage your neighbors to do the same. Again, if we hear from all the right people, we'll be able to include all the right information, and getting as broad a cross-section as possible is what will constitute as hearing from all the right people. So with that, I'll give back to Clint at the library.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. And please remember, we really want as much feedback, especially from diverse voices. So I might challenge all of you to maybe find 2 or 3 people that that maybe don't use the library now. And you can just ask them a few questions, guide them through the survey yourself. We really want as many voices as possible, because I really believe that this library will be very, very popular once it is built, and really be a destination for downtown. And we want to hear as much as possible so that we can make it suit as many needs as possible, with flexibility, diversity, and really making it something for everyone as much as possible. So please remember that the survey ends next Wednesday, July 15th, and our next meeting is July 28th, 7 p.m. Okay. So thank you, and have a pleasant evening.
All right, Clint, you have paper copies of the survey that people could get, as well as the digital ones, which are, you can do it on your phone or your computer, but what if you want to do it with a pencil?
Sure, we have curbside pickup at North Suffolk Library and Morgan Memorial Library, and you can just drive up, and there are signs outside, and staff will bring you copies. And we also have little cards that you can take as well if you'd like one of those.
All right. Well, I see we have used up almost all of the hour allotted here. I will leave the presentation open until the hour mark, at least, as people continue to interject comments and questions. So thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks for joining us, and have a great night.